when we start getting curious, right? And we're like, this is the family I came from, and this is the person I married, which, by the way, makes total sense because
Mhm.
we're good complements for each other. Now it's translating into parenting differences. Can we approach that with so much gratitude, knowing that our skills are going to be needed at different times?
Yeah.
That's where we've like hit the jackpot.
Today, I have the pleasure and honor of speaking with Dr. Emily Racic, who has been working with couples and families for over 15 years. She received her degrees in psychology and family science and is the owner of the Capital Crescent Collective, which is a group private practice in Maryland that offers therapy, coaching, and wellness services. In 2008, Emily published the Marriage Counseling Workbook, 8 Steps to a Strong and Lasting Relationship. Among all of the other hats that Emily wears, she is also a parent and in the process of co-parenting. Emily, it is great to have you with us today.
Excited too. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. And, I figure let's just get into it. Why is co-parenting so hard? Why is this, I have a fabulous partner. We both love our kids and it's still hard.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, and you love each other. Like, let's also, right? Like,
Yes.
yes, we love our children, but we did get married because we love this person. It is hard. Well, parenting is hard. And when we put two people in the mix who have different backgrounds, different perspectives, different tendencies, we're going to find conflict. Most of us code differences as a problem. And so I think sometimes when we're asking ourselves these questions, like, you know, why does he do that way, or why doesn't she do it the way that I do it? Part of what we're just bumping up against is like, this is a different human than me, and that just complicates the mix when parenting is something that works really well when it's coordinated. So I think it's a thing that all parents who are co-parenting run into, right? Like, you put two different brains together and they're going to have different ideas, and then we need to navigate our way through that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I imagine that in your practice, you have done a lot of this. You have seen a lot of this. And parenting is this massive Venn diagram of tasks and emotions and needs. Are there topics that lead to conflict more often than others?
Yeah. Yes. The answer is yes. I want to back up for a second, though, and say that most of us didn't talk about how we were going to co parent before we became parents. Like, most of us just didn't really go there, unless maybe you did some premarital counseling, or you wanted to make sure that parenting was something that was really on your mind, maybe from your family of origin. And so you were proactive about bringing it up. But most parents feel surprised to find out that they don't do it the same. And so I also just want to say that, like, part of the challenge when you are trying to navigate co-parenting with someone is just even getting over the hump that we have a challenge, right? Because usually we were on the same page about so many other things, and we have this really beautiful life, and now we're going to be parents, and then it's like, slam, reality, we're not the same. And so it may really be one of the first places where couples have to relearn, or like learn in a new way, some skills they didn't have tapped into before. So when we start thinking about the big buckets of differences, usually one of the first places we notice is when the other parent responds differently than we do. So to like some stimulus from the kid. We've got a toddler who's having a tantrum, and one parent wants to comfort and soothe, give the distress, and the other parent wants the tantrum to stop. Like, willing to be a little bit more firm or ignore the crying for
Mhm.
a little longer. And so these differences start to emerge in our responses to the kid. And then it's like, what do we do with that? So usually we see, like I was sort of explaining, one parent is more, the complaint is like they're too soft, or the complaint is they're too harsh.
Mhm.
Over time, when that gets really baked in and co-parents are in this kind of conflict state for a long time, what you can find is that even becomes more exaggerated. So we start to double down on our own side of the seesaw, and the
Mhm.
more that other parent is soft, the more I have to be harsh. And so we can actually end up exacerbating what originally was maybe only a slight difference in approach. And so often in my practice, you see people who are kind of few revolutions down the road of this, where things are pretty entrenched. But generally speaking, co-parenting challenges can happen at any moment. and don't necessarily have to be very intense. I also would just caveat this whole conversation by saying we're talking about co-parenting differences in the realm of safe behavior, right? Like if
Sure.
you have a co-parent who's making you nervous about safety or like, crossing boundaries that you think are like really more intense, I don't think that's what we're talking about here in this conversation. So let's just be clear that we're not talking about things that are egregious or unsafe for our kids, but just not the way we would do it. Right. So
Yes.
that feels important
Fair.
too.
Good. Yes, let's call that out right now. Yes. Brilliant. As you're talking about this, I'm thinking back to one of the first times I felt like I experienced that conflict myself, and it had to do with letting my oldest cry it out through the night. She was not a great sleeper, and it broke me listening to her cry, and it did
Yes.
not my husband at all. And when we finally decided, had to talk about this and say, for him to say, "I really think we can't keep doing this," and for me to take him seriously and say, "Okay, we are partners in this, so I'm going to listen to you." I literally left the house. I went and stayed at a friend's house because I could not listen to the crying. And
I stayed in the basement.
yes.
I was in the basement bedroom and he was upstairs finishing the crying it out. Yeah, but first of all, I love that example because it illustrates something we don't always think about, which is that the differences in our parenting can be a strength. Like, what a strength in your relationship that you had two tools in your toolbox. We have your heightened sensitivity to a child's distress, and we have his tolerance, higher tolerance of that distress. And that is a good thing for our family. So, this is another really great point as we're sort of framing this conversation. We don't have to approach every difference as a problem, but rather as like us facing a decision together. Here's the challenge we're facing. We've got a kid who needs to go to sleep, and we're having trouble deciding whose way to go. We've tried one of our ways. Are we going to try the other way? We've moved from having the problem be in between the two of us, where I'm
Mhm.
against you and you're against me, to us being against the problem or the situation that we have to face together, which creates such a sense of teamwork that's really helpful for conflict negotiation. Because I love you. I remember you're a smart person that I care about and respect. And so it opens me up to being more flexible. I'm able to do some perspective taking, hear your point of view, and then be willing to try it. And you can always frame it like that, like, well, let's try it for a day, or let's do an experiment for some amount of time, gather some data, see how it goes.
Yeah.
So I love that example. It's a difference in co-parenting that was a beautiful thing.
I really like the visual of the two of you, whoever it is that you're co-parenting with, coming together literally to the same side of the table. So instead of being oppositional, now the problem is the opposition, and that is what is sitting opposite you, and that you two now need to figure out how to tackle that together. And again, as you were talking, I was like, and the problems change. I am a parent of three teenagers, and my husband and I do have differences in how we approach aspects of parenting. And so to think about our way of approaching these as tools that we can use in the raising of our kids is a really empowering message.
Yeah. Yeah. And when we start, okay, so here's another thing that I'm thinking about. In your example of the kid who's crying in the middle of the night, we're not negotiating what to do at 2 a.m. Like when, you know what I mean? It's like when the thing is happening, when the kid is tantruming, when we have to set the boundary, when it's time to put our shoes on and go, when we need to make a decision about yes, you can go to that sleepover or not. That's probably not the time to try to sort it out between you. It's really hard to do it anyway in the moment. And so if you're experiencing co-parenting challenges, another really great strategy is to make sure you're carving out time to talk about it together. Just like you said, this beautiful image of sitting together at the table on the same side, like looking at the notepad, right, or the calendar or whatever the decision is, and doing it when you're not stressed out. When your
Hmm.
nervous system is calm and safe, you're much more able to listen, to process, and to come at it with a sense of curiosity. Like, I wonder why he thinks X is the best approach. Maybe I could ask him a question about why he thinks that is or where that comes from. And usually, when you start to pull on that thread, you find some really powerful stories. maybe from their family of origin or from the way that they grew up. Maybe it's something that they're trying to replicate that was really helpful or important or formative for them that they're trying to give to their own kid, your own kids together. Maybe it's something they're trying to not do. Like they're
Mhm.
trying to do the opposite. And so they're avoiding something that was painful or hurtful or uncomfortable for them as a child. And so they have this sense of importance and urgency about not doing the other thing. So this thing is really important.
Yeah.
Once you start hearing those stories from each other, you usually get to the point where you're like, gosh, that makes a lot of sense. I totally get how, given your family, knowing what I know about your mother, like that makes a lot of sense that you would have come to this conclusion or that it's important that we do it this way. And you can kind of sit there with empathy and understanding and a sense of being seen and appreciated. You can still decide not to do it that way, right? You still have some amount of negotiation and co-decision making to go through. But when you de-escalate the defensiveness and the rigidity of like having to hold tight to something so hard because it's going to get ripped away,
Mhm.
it relaxes a little bit and you're like, huh, okay, so given my tendencies and given yours, what do we want to do for
Mhm.
our family? Like, what mix of that is going to be a beautiful mix of us? Feeling like there's both of you in the mix leads to the best success for your family. Most of us come at it like we want it our way. We think very highly of ourselves. It's a wonderful thing about being human, right? And we can kind of get in our own echo chamber, like, well, of course, my way is the best way.
I got it. I'll just interrupt you, Emily, just for a second. I definitely load the dishwasher the best way of anybody in my family.
I believe you. I believe you. We don't even have to debate that. But yeah, we do. We sort of come at it like, well, of course it should be my way. And the other person's like, well, of course it should be my way. And now we're just battling out about whose way. We're in a power struggle. Again, we're remembering like we're both on the same team. We're trying to do a good job for our kids. Like ultimately, this is what we want for our children and the experience we want them to have in this family. So it behooves us to sit down and think about it and be thoughtful and like try something and see how it goes and try a new thing and see how it goes. It's just a really different energy we bring to this messy thing that is co-parenting.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to set aside family of origin for a second and come back to that. But when we think about approaching each other in this way, whoever it is that we're co parenting with, to hear you describe it, it is smooth and lovely. I get very curious and I listen to the stories. My partner is able to share those stories with clarity and like, definitely, this is why I'm engaging this way and behaving this way. It's because this happened and it's so important to me for X, Y, and Z. And then I, as the listener, can empathize. And all of a sudden, we have a clear path forward. And man, we're like writing a script for a 30-minute sitcom where it just all gets wrapped up neatly in a bow. I imagine it doesn't always happen that way. And I'm also thinking about for myself how I used to approach conversations like that when we were first married, and that I was not always comfortable in that space, and that I had to work for those questions for me to not feel that I needed to defend. And so, is there a way that you work with individuals to even come and ask those questions of one another and be open to having those conversations?
Yeah, it's a really good point. I mean, it's easy to talk about it in the ideal sense of things and at our messy kitchen tables, right? It's not always the case. And usually, we think about busy families who are having these conversations on the margins late at night when there's still dishes in the sink. It's not easy to unpack all of this stuff. Sometimes the conflict feels like it's exponential. So not only are we not on the same page about parenting, but we haven't had sex in ages and we're not looking at money the same way. So we can kind of bring like the whole kitchen sink to this, and we kind of bring like the full force. So one thing I would say when you're thinking about approaching your co-parent to have one of these conversations or to bring up a challenge or an issue is to make sure you can untangle it from the rest of the stuff. Can you really just bring the parenting piece of this? And, I know we're going through a lot and we both have a ton on our plate. I want to talk about what happened yesterday when our son threw the remote control. Are you open to talking about that? And so you can sort of set the stage. And then I think there's a really helpful formula to present your experience. when XYZ situation was happening. And so the XYZ situation is like describing it kind of factually. Like when you said the show had to end and he threw the remote at the floor. So you sort of name the situation. And then the second part is I felt afraid that he was gonna break something. Or I imagine you felt afraid that he was gonna break the remote. And you kind of do some, either your own perspective taking, if that's what you're trying to share, or you're doing some imagined perspective taking. And that's generous. You're being kind in that perspective taking as far as you can be. So then you offer like normalization. So like it makes sense that then you jumped off really, really strongly and you grabbed the remote and you said no shows for the rest of the weekend. Like first the situation, then the feelings, and then so then this other thing happened. And when you set it up that way and you're able to tie those dots together, usually the other person has followed you. And so you're reducing the defensiveness, right? Because they might be like, yeah, I was like, live it. We just bought that TV. How could he do that? And you're like, yeah. And then you kind of come to the request. And I'd really like it if both of us worked hard to keep our voices down or not grab the thing out of his hand, but like maybe try to do it more gently. And so then that's the harder part. What's the feedback? What's the thing that I'm looking for? And how, again, remembering that the goal here isn't to just change our partner's behavior. We're not trying to just have control over our partner and make them do it our way. We're trying to come up with a specific outcome for our kid. And so we can also start to frame it that way. It's kind of a long speech, right? Most of us don't do all that packaging when we bring something to our partners, but I think it can be really helpful, that context.
Yeah.
You may still get a no, right? Like you may have done all these things and your partner's like, no, if he throws the remote, that's what I'm going to do. Those moments are tough because then you have to say, my recommendation in that moment is I hear you. I still don't think it's the way that we should approach it, but let's try talking about it again in another time. And I think the other thing to remember, to your point about the problems change over time, like our kids are going to be with us. They're growing up and we will have more than one opportunity to come to this, decision point together. We don't have to solve everything right now, And so again, if we can kind of relax our sense of urgency, again, in the realm of like normal kid behavior and normal parent responses, we can kind of take a little bit of a longer view, give each other a little bit more benefit of the doubt. Sometimes we don't always operate from our best. And maybe that wasn't your partner's best moment with the remote control. And maybe just even bringing it to them in that way enables them to be more thoughtful next time.
Yeah, yeah. And coming to a conversation like that from that place of, I imagine that you want this too, just like I do. And that's why I want to bring it up. And it means, speaking for myself, being willing to do it again, to bring it up again. So this is important to me. And as a partner, I hope you can help talk to me about it because it is important to me. I really like you said during the description when XYZ happened and ABC happened, this and instead of saying but, you said and. And
Exactly.
yeah, that's
Yeah,
so key.
really good catch. That's one of the things I teach the most often, to use and instead of but, because it joins the two things together, the two thoughts together, rather than putting them in opposition to one another. I know that you meant well, but you
I know.
screwed it
Yeah.
up. It's like really hard, I know
When I
I know you meant well, and you yelled at him. It's like it lands a little differently.
It does. And I have always, in hearing this, but something else, I feel like that but it just negates everything that came before. It doesn't matter what you said to me, how nice it was, how beautiful. You just said but. So I think that's really key language.
Yeah. I think the other thing that's really powerful, if you're sensing that there's going to be some defensiveness, can you get curious about how your parenting is landing with your partner, right? Could you, instead of coming with like, this is my concern and I'd like to talk about what you did, could you start with, hey, I've been reflecting on how we're both parenting. Our kids are in a different phase now. And I'm just wondering, like, how do you think we're doing? How do you think I'm doing? So sometimes even soliciting feedback on yourself first lowers everybody. Now we're just having constructive conversations about how parenting is going and what's hard for both of us. And nobody's the problem. Again, we're a team here. trying to raise these children. I think the other thing that can be really helpful is to find an external resource together that you both agree you'd like to try. So there's so many parenting books out there. In my experience, again, in this over under functioning pattern that a lot of couples get into over time, one parent becomes the parenting expert. They've read all the books, they've listened to all the podcasts, and the other parent is like kind of doing it on the fly, like doing kind of the best they can. And that can create kind of like a knowledge imbalance and a little bit of a power struggle where like, well, I know better because I read the book. Maybe there's a book you could read together, or there's a workshop you could go to together, or one podcast episode you could listen to together. And then you can be like, oh, what did you think about that? Can you imagine your mom ever doing it that way? I can't imagine my mom ever doing it that way, but I could see how that could be helpful. Now we're like theoretically talking about it. Sometimes that's also a really helpful way to get it going. And then if there's agreement, okay, we've read, Dr. Becky Kennedy's book, Good Inside, and we both buy into the premise and we're going to start practicing the concepts. Now we're like in this project together. And we can even give each other permission, like, let me know how you think I'm doing. This is going to be the harder skill for me, and we can help each other because we're on the same team about having a resource to help parents navigate all of this. You don't have to go it alone.
I really like that suggestion. I just was having a conversation with my husband about this not long ago, this recognition that I've had recently that I feel so much more suited to parenting little kids, that the physicality of parenting little kids I was ready for. And the emotional aspect of parenting teens is something that drains me really quickly. And my husband is so much more well suited to that. And even just recognizing that difference and that having a tool then that we are both working on together, or a resource where we're coming to it and saying, okay, here's the tool that I bring, here's the tool you bring, or the tools. Now we have a resource. We can kind of figure out like how do we use our tools towards this end that we're both understanding. I think something else that you said as you were talking that came up for me, because I think a piece of what you're talking about in working together really does require each one of you, or certainly the person that's raising these issues and these questions, to come. And for me, I would have to come to all of this having thought about it ahead of time. How is it that I feel? What is it that I would like to have happen instead of what happened? And that takes some time for me sometimes. I can't just in the moment, if it were to come and be presented to me, no matter how gently, sometimes I might have to say, I appreciate that, but I need some time to think about this. And so I don't know, I guess just calling out there that might happen.
Yeah.
And that's where you bring it back up again and you agree, okay, let's talk about it again in whatever amount of time feels right.
Yeah. And if what happened, or the differences that you're noticing are particularly tender, like, I'm like, parenting brings up stuff that we didn't even know we were carrying. Like it is a roller coaster, and it changes as the kids change and as we change as people and our lives change. And so, yeah, sometimes we need a little bit of time to sit with it, to like wrap our own head around it, or to give our partner some time to wrap their head around it. And so again, remembering that we have time, we have time to figure this out. And then we're going to have time to do it the next round and the next round. Kind of, again, relaxes and alleviates some of that sense of urgency. And you can also cue things up. Like, I've been thinking about what happened this weekend and how we both were responding to the kiddos. And I haven't quite wrapped my head around what was going on for me or how I would do it differently, but I'd really like to talk about it at some point. Would you like to talk about it? Okay, great. Well, do you think after everybody's asleep tomorrow, so you can prepare, we can take notes, we can do journaling, we can talk to friends, we can talk to our therapist or our coach. We can kind of like get ready and bring some more of those deeper insights, because it's often not so much what's happening on the surface, the actual behavior itself, but it's the meaning we've ascribed to the behavior. It's the story I'm telling myself about what you're doing and why and what impact it's going to have. It's the storytelling. That's really where I'm getting stuck. Part of unpacking and like making co-parenting decisions is understanding what those stories are. And to your point, that takes some time, some processing time,
Yeah.
which some of us need more of than others.
Yeah. I think it's is it Brene Brown that talks about shitty first stories and how we come to these situations like already having created this narrative, and we just have to sometimes get that out there and then edit and really understand the real story, not the one that we've made in our heads.
And giving our partners a chance to know like what it means to your go back to your example with the crying it out. You could have told yourself a story about his tolerance to the crying, that he didn't care. Like that would be a really shitty first story. It'd be like, wow, turns out I married someone who doesn't care about our children and doesn't love them. Like, because you would have equated being okay with crying to not loving a kid, because you are not okay with crying and you love your kid. So you can really kind of get stuck. Letting go of that story, you're asking, like, so when you have a high tolerance for crying, like, what's going on for you? What does that mean? And he's like, well, it just doesn't bother me. Like, I'm actually able to respond to the need because I don't feel activated. Like, I'm okay. I can go in and change the diaper and I'm not overwhelmed. You're like, oh, that's like a superpower.
Yeah.
So now I've changed the story. Instead of you being this like robot of a co-parent, you're a superhero co-parent. Like what, how much better now do I feel about the same behavior, which is that you can tolerate the crying for longer and you can go in there and not get activated and take care of what needs to happen without getting like overwhelmed. So yeah, I love that idea from Brene Brown to be like, well, the story I'm telling myself is that XYZ, and letting the other person be like, not at all what's going on in my head.
Yep. Yeah. Invite them into that. This reminds me of something that you said in our last conversation, that what we love in our partner often becomes the thing that frustrates us. So how does that play out in co-parenting? I grew up in a family that has been accused of just avoiding hard things. Like, you guys just do not talk. All three in-laws say, your family does not talk about hard things. And that is the opposite of the way that my husband grew up. They were a family that in each other's faces talked about things and then moved past it. And, a couple of hours later, we're able to be like, I love you. I love you too. And the first time I was a part of this happening, my blood pressure went up and I thought, how are they going to survive this? And then they did, and they
Yeah.
moved on.
And even in the moment, probably that your blood pressure is going up, I think you maybe also are thinking, like, wow, this is cool. There's an
Amazing.
attractiveness to, wow, you can argue and then say, I love you. Like, I love this. How freeing for me, coming from a family that couldn't share. Now I can share with you. I'm like liberated. You know what I mean? Okay. So fast forward to, why do you always have to make things an argument? Why can't you just let stuff go? Right? Because now this thing that I thought was shiny and attractive just is different than me. And over time, when we kind of like want sameness, when we can't tolerate difference anymore, and so we want sameness, we like demonize that very thing. Right. So another classic example from like the couple therapy world is you meet someone who's like very much more type B and like relaxed. And for the first time in your type A life, you've had a lazy Saturday morning and you just love it in the beginning. Oh my gosh, it's just delicious to sleep in and have coffee till 2 o'clock and like watch shows. And you're just like, this is heaven.
Yes.
And then fast forward, you're like, get up. We have stuff to do. Why do you always want to hang out on Saturdays? So they kind of revert back. Okay, so how does all this happen in parenting? Well, I think you just told us a few minutes ago. You love little kid parenting. You love the touchy-feely on the floor, in my lap, using body language to help them feel their feelings and feel their way through it. That is born out of a family that solved conflict without talking about it. Like, you're solving conflict for your kid without talking about it because your 3-year-old cannot. Cannot. And so you have this skill set of like, I can be with you and love you through it without using my words. But then you said, my teenagers, that's your husband's dinner table. Teenagers are like, I will tell you what I think, and your blood pressure's up and you're like, which is why your husband shines, because he can get in your teenager's face with love and say what he's going to say back and hold boundaries and stand up to them and get in their face. You did this with your hands. And then say, love you, kiddo. Have a great day at school, right? So that's how you're like,
You just broke down my family in 2 minutes.
my gift to you. Right? So like, when we start getting curious, right? And we're like, this is the family I came from, and this is the person I married, which, by the way, makes total sense because
Hmm.
we're good complements for each other. Now it's translating into parenting differences. Can we approach that with so much gratitude, knowing that our skills are going to be needed at different times? That's where we've like hit the jackpot.
So we've kind of already gone there. I said I'd like to hold the talk about family of origin and its role, but I feel like this is like we're dancing around it, if not dancing with it right now, about this idea.
Yes. And another way to think about it when we're exploring our family of origin is thinking about what our little kid needed, ourselves as a child needed that was unmet. Even those of us who up in like wonderful, loving homes. There were usually some things that could have gone differently for us that we would have appreciated just based on our personality or our life trajectory. And often those longings inform how we parent. So I'll give you an example from my life. So I grew up in just a fantastic family. Mom and dad, if you ever hear this podcast, thank you for a wonderful childhood. And happy children were beloved, and upset children were not as welcome at the dinner table or in the family room. And it wasn't that there was like a really harsh consequence for those negative feelings, but they just really weren't in the room, right? The happy, the fun, the smart, the interesting, all those other things were like given a lot more airtime. And so I struggled as a teenager with my hard feelings, and I did a lot of therapy, and I came out of that. And when I became a mom, one of the things that was really important to me was that my kids' big negative feelings belonged in the room. And it means that I'm very tolerant of tantrums, of anger, fear, anxiety, like what I can just hold space for that because that's what I really wanted to be held for me. And that's different than my co-parent for whom big feelings were kind of like big and scary and unbounded. So he feels this urge to create a container for big feelings. Again, not to squash them, but to like set some guardrails. And I'm like, we don't need any guardrails. Like my arms are big enough. You know what I mean? And so that's a difference that we have that's born out of like our experiences as little kids. And so sometimes when you think about like, why is this so important to me? The answer can be found in like, what was my version of that? Or like, what is the thing I'm trying to redo for myself? And maybe if I can understand like where my partner's difference is coming from, we can maybe more meet in the middle. Because now that he understands that that this tolerance is so important, he relaxes his guardrails a little bit. And now that I know why those guardrails are in place for him and where it tips over into him feeling like things are going off, off into not a good place, I respect those guardrails better. And so now we've kind of come to this middle ground where we're both getting our need met and we're both helping each other getting our need met. But it doesn't look all my way or all his way. And that took a lot of work.
Yeah. In asking yourself the question, what did my younger self need that it didn't get separate from a parenting event? Or can that also be a tool that we come to like when something is happening and you recognize I am having emotions about this or I am having an experience, that's just another question we can ask ourselves. Perhaps this is connected to myself as a child, my own childhood, my family of origin, something that I felt like I needed.
Yeah, I
And
think
I
it's
don't know, it's
both.
an either or.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's both. It could be either, it could be both. Just like our kids, right? Our big feelings hold important data. And so when we're getting a strong, I didn't like that response about something that's happening, it's worth paying attention to it and getting curious about it. Why? Like, what was I feeling? What was the story I was telling myself? What does it remind me of? When have I felt that way in a similar situation before? Sometimes it's really helpful to just kind of talk it out to yourself. So you could do like a voice memo on your phone, like go for a walk and just kind of like stream of consciousness talk, and then you can listen to it back. Yeah, it's really um insight into yourself that's really helpful to inform what's happening for your kid and what's happening with you and your co-parent.
Hmm. I just did an interview earlier this week with a woman. We were talking about intuitive eating, and her big message with intuitive eating is like, you really need to get curious about yourself. And you just said that exact same phrase. This is really about getting curious. Like, I am having this emotion, and why is this happening for me? And really interrogating that. And I'm just thinking, I mean, I get it as a busy working parent, 3 teens, my husband works, there's a lot going on, and there are a lot of things in life that can easily distract. And when you have big emotions, it's easy to just want to set those aside or put them away. But
Well,
I have now had 2 interviews with people who said, "Get curious about yourself. It's okay. It's so important."
yeah, it really, really is because when we have a sense of what's going on the inside, and we have assessed the data, we can come out into the world and make decisions and make choices and have conversations that are well informed. Like I'm not coming at this with my shitty first story or my judgments about you or my fear-based narrative. I'm coming at this having done some work first. And I think that buys credibility with our partners. Again, like in well-connected, really good enough marriages, we give that weight when our partner comes with us being thoughtful about something. It's harder to be really dismissive in that moment when there's been a lot of thought. And I think the other thing this is making me think of is just like how many voices are in our heads about what the heck we should do. It's like I've got my family, I've
Yes.
got my mother-in-law, I've got my mom, I've got the books I read, I've got my friends at the playground, the school moms on the PTA, Instagram feed. It's like
I know.
I can't even hear myself think in the moment. And so doing some processing work, coming to some realizations, some insights, some decisions, now I can kind of like rise above the noise and hear my own voice in my head. Becky Kennedy, I've talked about her before. I love her concept of being sturdy. Like
Mhm.
one of the best stances to have as a parent is a sturdiness to yourself that like I can be in the presence of my kiddo with whatever's happening and hang on to my own nervous system so that I can co-regulate my kid and move them through this hard thing while I stay okay. And I think that like there's something there for when we're having a hard moment with our partners too. Like, can I bring a sturdiness to myself? Not an attack mode, not a defensive mode. I'm not a victim. I'm not a villain. We're not taking any of those roles on. I'm just me. I'm your partner and your co-parent trying to do my best, giving you the benefit of the doubt that you're trying to do your best. And our kid's been having tantrums lately. And what are we going to do about that? Or
Yeah.
our kid wants a phone. What are we going to do about that? Or any of the things that we're trying to decide as a family, as a parenting unit. So I just think that it's helpful. This inner work is helpful so that we can parent as ourselves, which is such a gift to our kiddos when we're ourselves. They came from us anyway. So like,
Yeah.
it's a gift.
I really that's beautiful. That's a beautiful idea and something that I'm still working on.
May we all continuously work on it. You know what I mean? Because gosh darn it, as soon as we have it figured out, our kid surprises us
Yes.
and
Oh,
they
don't they?
change the rules. And then we're like, okay, so what used to work
Not so much.
anymore,
Yeah.
or like, they need something different. We need something different. We want to relax a boundary that we felt really strongly about before. We want to strengthen a boundary that we were more relaxed about before. And being on the same team, knowing that we have someone who's going to back us up, who we also back up, is like, what we're all working towards. And we won't always be there in any given moment. But feeling like you have the skill set to tackle it and you can always come back and always come back.
You have said this before, you just said it there. You have time. You really have time. And I talk about this when we're talking about feeding kids in this sense that like, well, if they don't eat this broccoli right now, like I am failing. We have so much time to feed kids. Parenting doesn't stop when they turn 18 or leave the house. And I know that you aren't there yet personally, having experienced adult children. And I don't know if you work with clients that have, but I imagine all of this continues when you have adult children
But
as
yeah,
well.
sure, because there's still decisions that you have to make, right? How much money do we give them, if anything at all, when they want their first car? Do we let them sleep in the same room as their girlfriend when they come home for Christmas break? Like there's all sorts of stuff we've got to decide when they're grown-ups. And yeah, and so those conversations really never stop. My mom always say like the days are long and the years are short.
Yes.
But here's the thing that happens when we're in conflict. Particularly, I think when we're in conflict about our kids, because, we would all say kids are our most important thing. And it's really important that like they're okay and we're doing the best we can for them. And so there's already kind of like an intensity when we're talking about parenting. But that same intensity, when we're in that sympathetic brain state, when our nervous system is activated and we've got a lot of anxiety, like, are they going to agree with me? And are they going to change their ways? And is this going to get better? And am I messing up my kid, right? Anxiety, to your point about time, is like a time warp. Sometimes it speeds us up and there's that sense of urgency. If they don't eat the broccoli right now, like, it's never going to happen. And we feel like we're grasping at something and we're going too fast. And sometimes anxiety freezes us. And in the moment when we need to do something or we need to say something and we need to step in or we need to like use our voice, we go silent because we're frozen, right? There's a fight and flight response and then there's a freeze response. And so I just offer that to just say that like, this is another plug for taking your time to think about it. Because when you can think about it and you can feel safe in your own nervous system and safe with your partner, like co-regulate first, hold hands, sit on the couch close so that your knees are touching, like be on the same team, allow yourselves to really feel into that. You like take a deep breath and you're like, okay, let's talk about yesterday when everybody was melting down and like how we want to approach that next Saturday before the soccer game when I think our kid's going to have a similar meltdown. Like, what do we want to do? Like now I'm like, okay, and you're okay, and we're okay together. And we're not in that time warp of either doing nothing because we're too overwhelmed or like kind of moving too fast, the steps.
Wanting to fix it immediately.
Wanting to fix it immediately. So anxiety has that weird, like funhouse mirror effect on us. And if we can remember, like, our kids are okay and we're okay and we can try again tomorrow and my partner can try again tomorrow, we're all in this together. It just like lets us take a big deep breath and kind of like come back down.
You have mentioned a few individuals and even some books that you have liked. Are there other resources that you would recommend for people who are interested in learning more, looking for guidance? Your book,
Yes.
obviously.
My book is lovely. Thank you for the plug. We're going to have another podcast episode where we talk about how I wrote that book, which was in the middle of the night when my youngest was an infant. That's a story for another day. I think Dr. Becky Kennedy's book, Good Inside, is fantastic. Dr. Dan Siegel's book about no drama discipline and I think it's Wise Mind, his book for teenagers, just fantastic science-based parenting research. And just also like remembering that to parent is a verb that requires a person. So, or like our conversation here about like parenting is you're a person. You are a parent who is a person and a partner. And so sometimes what we can do if we're struggling in our parenting, we can kind of focus some of our attention on strengthening our communication skills in other areas as a couple, our sense of teamwork in other areas of life where maybe we are able to get more traction on as a team. We can also do the work ourselves. One of the things that comes out of my marriage and family therapy training is that one person can change a system. And so even if you're experiencing a lot of resistance in your co-parent, or maybe you don't have a good relationship with your co-parent, doing work on yourself, parenting from your own wise self, knowing where all of your stuff comes from and why you're making these decisions enables you to stay grounded even in the presence of something different that isn't what you would do, because sometimes it's not possible to come to an agreement always with your co-parent. And so there's a lot of value in remaining in your sphere of influence, focusing on the things that you can control and influence. And a lot of that is what's on the inside for ourselves too. I'm sure maybe you've had this moment where you look around and you're like, where's the grown up? Like, where's the person around here?
Please show up now.
The mom, and it's like, it's me, right? And those are growth moments for us too as parents, right? Because we're going to learn something about ourselves and we're going to surprise ourselves sometimes with our resilience, or we're going to make a mistake, and we're going to do something that we said we'd never do, or respond in a way that's, not our first instinct, but what happened in that moment. And again, having some grace for ourselves, modeling repair,
Yes.
huge, huge for our kiddos. Like, we talk a lot in our family, sweetheart, about not raising our voices when we're angry. And I did that yesterday. And I'm really sorry that I did that. I think that might have been scary for you. And I'm going to try really hard not to do that both and next time. Like, what a model of an apology and a self-awareness. So even in the moments where we or our partners are like getting it wrong, we're not really, because we're human and we're in a family, and that can be really a helpful perspective too.
Yes, that can be a whole other show. How do we
How do we treat it right
model
the opposite way? Yeah.
apologies? Yes. So
Yeah.
important. I often find myself telling my kids, I have never done this before. I have not parented a 16-year-old before, so you'll have to give me some space to make mistakes because
Yeah.
I'm going to.
Yeah, you've never been 16 before, and I've never parented a 16-year-old, so we're both, like, let's figure this out together. And I think especially as kids get older, they kind of become a little more of a co-pilot with
They
you.
do. They do. Yeah.
They're they're advocating for themselves in ways that the little ones and the infants for sure, well, they're advocating for themselves too, quite frankly, but it's different. Yeah, so modeling that humility too, right? Like, I'm not always gonna get it right, and I wanna hear from you, kiddo and co-parent, about how I'm
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. That's
Yeah.
beautiful growth.
It is. Thank you so much, Emily. This was amazing. I knew it would be. What a pleasure. Thank you for taking
So
time
much
with
for
us
having me.
today.
This was so much fun. So much fun.
Yes.
Thanks for hanging out with me on The Weekly Parent. If something you heard today made you think, laugh, or feel just a little more human, don't be shy. Subscribe, text it to your BFF or group chat, or leave us a review. Remember, you'll find free tools, downloads, and whatever else I've cooked up this week in the show notes. Check those out. Parenting is messy. Let's not do it alone.